I don't know if we really want to go into sort of mechanics and procedures and things like that. I will take it to the authorities. If
Okay.
we're talking about the nature of the backdrop, which is to say, in many cases for play, backstory. So if we are on this ship to Jupiter and we've got the culling and we've got the circumstances that all the player characters either know or could know or wouldn't be all that shocked if they knew, right? All that stuff. All of that is pretty much coming from a text which is going to be sort of filtered and massaged and presented by the game master in their way. So that's where the backdrop is mostly there, and that's going to be the backstory for a given scenario is also coming more or less from that.
Okay.
From the so
Yeah.
it's held in one person's hand is I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Do the players contribute anything of that kind? In the case of Circle of Hands, we're talking about the key event. The player does contribute aspects of the backstory that may or may not be relevant. We'll see during play, but there is stuff that the game master didn't make up that is behind play. Doesn't have to be in a situation, but it's back there. It's now setting. As soon as I write down a key event, I just wrote a little tiny piece of setting.
There's only a couple. There's a couple of things. So we're talking about the initial design.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things where they did. So one was in like if you were naming your birth cluster, right? You could say, okay, I was born on Enceladus or something, and so okay, now there's a colony on
Now there
Enceladus,
is.
right?
Right. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other was that people would the different players would establish like there was a an event where their characters had encountered each other and had some sort of
Right. In
interaction.
other words, we're
Okay.
not going to
Okay.
play how we met. We're going to say how we met.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Mhm.
Now, do they have starting points in that spectrum? Or for purposes of discussion, without nailing it down, but for purposes of discussion, let's just go ahead and say that we've got a sliding scale of ideology or outlook,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
However you want to do it, whether you want to make it an X by Y with, quadrants, or whether you want to make it one long single scale
Hmm.
or whatever. I don't know. Maybe it's a wheel. I fucking don't know. Whatever makes you happy. And
Right.
so, but my real question is, do all the characters start at true neutral and we see where they go? Or does each one start at a place and then play either keeps them there or moves them somewhere else or moves them somewhere else in a different direction or whatever?
Right. My initial concept was the latter.
Right,
That
right.
yeah, you would
That's no
start at
surprise,
some
really.
point. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So, I mean, you're making different characters after all, right? Giving them outlooks. Now, here is an interesting point. It doesn't have to be, it could be the most deterministic would be you pick your spot, and then you also pick how much you change and which way, right?
You mean?
As play goes on.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Or you could randomize the spot. And then finally, to fill out all the options, the amount by which you get to change could also be subject to involuntary constraint of some kind, whether a roll or events of play or whatever. I don't know.
Interesting idea.
Well, but the point is that
Yeah.
you have the full range of how you want to do it.
Yeah.
Do we start off exactly where the player wants? I mean, you might. I'm not saying not to. And then is change also just personally determined? Oh, I think I'll move 3 points over that way. Or not, or maybe there is a certain
Yeah.
amount by which you're allowed to change if we wanted to be fiddly, we would make little check marks, during play and
Sure.
then count up the check marks or whatever. But you know what I mean. There's any number of
Yeah.
thousands of ways to do it.
Yeah.
So, but that's my point: is how much does the player basically have to kind of cope with what's thrown at them, specifically in terms of this ideological and empathic issue?
Yeah. Initially, I hadn't even thought of any sort of constraint on increments of changing like that. So it was all completely up to the player.
Okay.
How much they so, and whether that should stay, I don't know. But that
No,
was
I don't know
the
either.
initial
But
thought.
right now we're getting a look at it. So
yeah.
The so then there's also this interesting question of whether the technique that you talked about, which is, should I get a bunch of shit rolls and I'm picking up at least some bonuses or benefits to further rolls,
Right.
and the reverse, which I quite like, which is, I'm doing really well, but guess what? The storm is coming. The question is whether that permits play, the game master, the rules, however you want to call it, to be particularly ruthless. And so that way, if you really do get stuck, you're fresh out of bonus and you got that terrible roll. All right. I gave you all the bonus. You had all the bonuses coming to you.
Yeah.
Sorry, man. Or better yet, you've had an easy ride this session. Now you got your crap roll and there is nothing to save you now. Right. And the player's like, yep, that's how it goes. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
Ride high
right.
on your rolls and this is how their bottom drops out on this guy. Okay. So, but that's kind of nice. I mean, you'd have to play to see whether that dynamic actually captures it so that you can live up to your threat that the circumstances of play can be very, very harsh.
Yeah, I mean that would be a goal. That
Yeah,
yes.
I mean that's so. But do you see how I am actually seeing the different little wheels you're talking about being rather supportive of each other? Add to that the possibility of tipping the backdrop for yay or nay, and then also the changes in your ideology as your outlook as you go along, and you're kind of getting a nice. I mean, think about it. Let's do 3 or 4 really solid whole cloth adventures. When we look at the famous spaceship cast pose that you can find in any science fiction TV show, right?
Sure.
You got the cast and the bridge or whatever, right? And we're looking at them. Can you see that as of we start this 5th adventure, it's going to be a slightly different cast and they're going to be in slightly different circumstances. They're going to have slightly different relationships with one another. They're going to have different looks in their eyes than they did in the first one.
That's what I want to happen.
That's
exactly
about.
What I want.
But everything you're talking about really lends itself to that. And it even lends itself to that in terms of things that we, the players, know that the characters might not, specifically the outcome on the backdrop. Takes on a little weight.
I think that okay, that's useful. So that tells me that there wasn't anything necessarily fundamentally wrong with those concepts.
Although those concepts actually seem rather nicely mutually supportive.
Okay, so that's really useful because then I think my mechanics were like too nice.
Pretty easy from 2013. Go back 6 years, 7 years, and I think that's probably the case for a lot, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many people? Come on, Fate.
Yeah.
How many people die horribly in a game of Fate, for example? Right.
Never.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is sort of where I'm aiming is that let's go ahead and, if you wanted to, this is what I would do. Or no,
Hmm.
I'm going to set that and take all that back. Never mind what I would do. This is what I
Okay.
recommend.
Okay.
Find an image that speaks to you about what this is about, how it feels. Um, Whether if you were a graphic designer, I would say make a logo, right? I'm not a graphic designer, so what I usually do is I make a little collage of images that I find around the internet, and I make like a little collage. Or it might be a single image from somewhere, and it can be a ripoff. It can totally be a ripoff because this is an inspirational image, not an image to use. And that's why if the
Okay.
person is a graphics designer, I say I want this to be a provisional logo. I don't want it to be like the logo. I want it to
Right.
be, your first gut scribble. And you can kind of say, all right, whatever it is I do in playing this or scribbling on it or thinking about a rule or two, whatever it is I do, I'm going to be true to that.
Okay.
So, for example, for America, right, the game I keep saying I'm working on, um, my guiding image is a picture from the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago, the famous, riots and
Yeah.
stuff outside. Well, you may be aware that there was a pig that the weather people brought to the event. They called him Pegasus, and they nominated him for the Democratic uh,
Oh, you
candidate.
mean the Weathermen?
Yes. Hmm.
The Weathermen. Okay.
Yes. And so they and this is famous, Pegasus, right? And the big ceremony that they had to elect him, the candidate. Well, it's not as widely known. I think the optics on it aren't always the greatest. Um, in that they then did what Chicagoans do, what Midwesterners do with a pig in the middle of summer in Grant Park. you know, they killed him and roasted him up. Right? They had a big pig roast. Sharon Krebs, who was in at least in SDS and may have been part of Weather. Anyway, she was a player in all of this. Sharon Krebs then took Pegasus's head, stripped down to her sneakers, and walked into the Democratic convention and somehow got into the hall of all the delegates doing their debates and their voting, holding Pegasus's head on a tray and wearing only her sneakers.
I did not know that.
And
Wow.
the photo is amazing. She's striding
Okay.
down like the amphitheater, steps along all the seats.
Yeah.
And all of these incredibly establishmentarian looking people are caught in reaction. And it's
Yeah.
hilarious. They literally don't know where to look. I mean, that's the image is just hysterical, right?
Yeah.
And she's blithely walking down, tits and everything out, pig head on the plate. That's my image for America, that photo.
Gotcha. Okay.
And every time I'm not
So
sure
I
what
should
I'm
try to
doing in that
find.
game, yeah, whenever I can't think of what I'm, doing with this game, I go, okay, Sharon, gotta look at Sharon.
I see.
you know?
Gotcha.
So in
Gotcha.
this case, yeah, and again, it could be a rip. I mean, it could be a Boris Viejo painting for all I care, right? It's not supposed to be profound.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then
I
if
can
you
do
want
that.
to kind of summarize these things, now remember, none of this is set in stone. You can look at these things and say, all right,
Sure.
I see how that works. And all that does is show me that I want to do this other thing. That's fine as well.
Right.
But right now, just looking at it, just to get back in touch with where you were at.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, if you really feel motivated, you can always say, uh, since recent events have shown us that, you know, libertarian ideology promotes efficiency in all of our social services
I would
because
never
the
say
dead
such a thing.
no, I know, but I'm joking, I'm being sarcastic
Yeah,
here,
right.
that if all of the that we have been obviously seen in the last 2 decades how these ideologies have lifted, how the rising tide has lifted all boats, I mean, and that as long as GDP goes up, as long as the stockholders are secure, then everything else just takes care of itself, right? And all we have to do is have some tycoon stand up and give a big speech about how they are totally selfish, but if it weren't for them, we wouldn't have all these wonderful things. Well, we do have instead the events of your and my entire lifetime as a counter argument to this. And there's no particular reason not to put a little bit of fire into your procedure for coming up with situations and scenarios on that basis.
um, you mean make use of contemporary events in
No, I
the?
mean make use of your
Uh,
contemporary passion.
oh, okay, sure, gotcha.
Right. The
Sure.
and so in other words, the procedures for how we are where we are, whatever they may be, clearly it's not just so we can have another fun action movie episode.
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, that's kind of where I've got for tonight. Does that seem like we've gotten somewhere useful?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, I already mentioned how it's
Yeah.
helped clarify a lot. So I
All right.
appreciate it very
Excellent.
much. Okay.
We'll continue,
Mhm.
as you wish. If you want to continue, then I'll invoice you.
I would. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, and so then that gets you a couple more sessions and some play, and we strong arm a couple people over at the server to come join us one of these evenings.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
excellent. Thanks a lot, Manu.
Thank you so much, Ron. I really appreciate it.
Take
Okay.
care.
Bye bye. You too.